what I'm going to talk about. But first, I'm going to tell you that there's a big problem in science at the moment about developing theories, which is mainly that there's an information overload. And then I'm going to basically propose that I have a method to address this problem. And this method is going to use evolutionary computation, and in particular genetic programming. So I'll tell you more about that. And then I'll go into the detail of the method I'm proposing, which is these genetically evolving models in science, or GEMS. And I'm going to apply it to psychology. And then I'll talk about some current and future developments. And at the end, because it's the Popper seminar, I thought I should make a link with what Popper said. And basically, I made some kind of comparison between GEMS and Popper's philosophy of science. Of course, Popper said many things about philosophy of science, and GEMS doesn't say that much, so it's a bit unfair to compare both, but still I think that's going to be interesting. So as you know, there is at the moment information overload in science. There is a huge number of scientific papers published every year, every day actually. In psychology, there is more than 1,500 journals, and most of them publish empirical data. And of course, nowadays we can collect a huge amount of data with the sensors and all sorts of technology. So the question is basically what do we do with all this data? And if you collect all this data and you cannot somehow transform them into theories, well, something has been lost, obviously. Also, probably some of you develop theories, and you know that it's very hard work. I spent a fair amount of my life developing computer models, and it's very hard. You make bugs, and you spend hours and hours trying to find a stupid bug. And now I'm getting old, getting lazy, and I thought, well, basically, we need something else. And basically, that's the motivation behind this approach. Well, two problems are motivation behind this approach, but it would be nice to have basically computer programs that develop automatically theories for you. Okay? By the way, I'm going to use theories and models more or less in the same meaning. I mean, you might argue about that, but that's what I'm going to do. So the research I'm going to talk about today is a multidisciplinary research, mostly between artificial intelligence, psychology, and philosophy. And the ideas of this talk, although I've applied them only to psychology so far, I think they can be applied to any science that has empirical data, experimental data. Sorry. So experimental data, that's really the key aspect of this project. Because as you know, an experiment tells you something about causality. And causality is why I'm here. Because the logo of LSE is rerum cognoscere causas, which means basically you understand the meaning of things, the cause of things. That's taken from a verse by Virgil. And again, the point of an experiment is that basically, because you manipulate some variables, the independent variables, and you measure the effect of the manipulation on dependent variables, you can say a lot about causality. Of course, there are other data in science, like correlational data or time series. These data are very valuable, but they don't allow to tell you that much about causality as data from an experiment. So that's one of the key aspects of this research, to use experimental data. Now, one of the aims of research in psychology is obviously to develop theories. And you want theories that explain phenomena such as forgetting, for example. And even if you don't develop computer programs, developing theories in general is hard, probably in particular in psychology, because you have many variables that are involved. And also, there's also a large number of possible mechanisms. And the difficulty here is that basically you have a combinatorial space. So, and if you look at all these possible variables and their values and all the possible mechanisms, you have a huge space which is pretty much infinite. And basically, somebody who develops a theory is somebody who is going to search this space. So that's the kind of analogy that was used by Simon and Landry and colleagues. That, well, first, problem solving in general is a search for a problem space. And also that the scientific discovery is just a specific type of problem solving. But again, you have to search this space, which is absolutely huge. And basically, my claim is that because we have here a combinatorial space, this is going to outgrow human capacities. So humans can search only a very small subspace of this space. However, things are not that bad because in recent decades, artificial intelligence has developed a variety of techniques that are very efficient to develop such spaces. There are actually quite many such techniques like neural nets, ARM algorithms, and so on. Today I'm going to talk only about one class of technique called evolutionary computation. So evolutionary computation is based on natural evolution. It's not really the same kind of mechanism, but the key ideas are taken from natural evolution. And the idea is to evolve populations of artificial organisms. So you start with a population of artificial organisms on your computer, and then you are going to evolve them. And you also use the idea of the survival of the fitter, and the fitter organisms are going to reproduce. And the advantage of this kind of computation is that it's going to allow you a parallel search through this problem space. And this search is not only parallel, but it's also highly efficient. Now, there are quite a few methods for evolutionary computation. Actually, evolutionary computation is a big field in artificial intelligence. The two main approaches are genetic algorithms and genetic programming. And today we are going to focus on the genetic programming. By the way, how many of you have ever heard about genetic programming? Okay, a few people. Anybody? And the overall algorithm of both evolutionary computation and genetic algorithms is very simple. So you start by initializing a population of individuals. And these individuals can be actually random, which is quite interesting and beautiful. But you can also have individuals that, in your view, are a possible solution. Then you run all the individuals through a problem. And for each individual, you compute the success that it has given the problem. So that allows you to compute a fitness function. And then what you do is to select the parents, the higher fitness function, and you create a new generation by mating these the best individuals. Delete the previous generation, and you insert the new members into the population, and basically you start again. Okay? You repeat that until basically you don't need any further generation. Is this more or less clear? Yes. Okay. Now the technique I'm going to talk about is called genetic programming. And here, this is actually a very beautiful idea. What you are going to evolve are basically computer programs. And the first claim is that basically you can implement functions as trees, like here, for example. So we have this simple function, a plus b times 2, and that can be represented as a tree. In some form of logic, you actually use pretty much this representation, like the operators at the beginning. Is it the Polish notation? But the point is that any kind of function, you can represent it that way. And not only any kind of mathematical function, but any kind of computer program, you can represent it as a tree. So you can take your favorite computer program, Microsoft Word, for example, and if you are patient enough, you can write this tree. And some computer languages, such as Lisp, for example, use basically this notation and also the idea of a tree. And that project actually started with the implementations in Lisp, because again it maps very well the kind of things you want to do. Now the second important aspect of this research is that scientific theories can be represented as computer programs. So that's a fairly old idea, at least in psychology, but probably in many other sciences as well. I don't think it's controversial, maybe it is. And the idea is that any kind of theory can be represented as a computer program. If you cannot do that, it means that your theory is too vague and basically it's not a good theory. Again, the theories can be represented as trees, and the method developed by Causa basically shows how to evolve these trees. So the idea is really that because theories, scientific theories are computer programs, you can evolve them. Okay? So that's one of the key aspects of the argument. So how do you evolve computer programs? Well, you use three main operators. The first one is selection, which is basically you select the best fitting individuals. The second one is mutation. And here what you do is to randomly change the value of a node in your tree. So here, for example, we have a minus, and randomly you change that into a plus. Okay? And the second operator is a crossover. So what you do here is to move one subtree of a program, and you basically swap it with a subtree of another program. So basically you swap these two subtrees and you get these two programs. Okay? Now this is a very radical change. And very often the kind of program you get are not going to work. So part of the beauty of genetic programming is basically that there are ways basically to test whether a program is valid or not. And basically you can eliminate the programs that do not run before they crash your computer. Okay? So basically you do that in some kind of virtual environment. And genetic programming has some very useful properties. The first one is that you can evolve the entire computer programs. Which again, I find it a very, very nice idea. With many of the other approaches, like genetic programming, your genotypes have a fixed like a human genotype, for example. This is again not the case with the genetic programming. So you can change the genotype of your program, which is a very useful property. Also, the hierarchical structure of the trees is going to be very convenient to simulate cognitive processes. So, for example, you could assume that some subtrees or subprograms are basically some modules, and you can treat them as primitives. Okay? So, now let's try to apply this to evolving cognitive theories. And I repeat the key idea, which is pretty much a direct application to the algorithm I showed you before. So you start with a population of theories, which can be either random or selected. And these theories are made of basic mechanisms. Each theory is going to make a prediction on a given task. And then what you do is to compare the prediction of the theory with actual empirical data. You compute a fitness function, which tells you how good the prediction is. You select the best theories, and you produce the next generation of theories, and you keep doing that. Okay? And of course, the way you produce the next generation of theories is using things like mutation and crossover. So let's yeah.
Is that evolution?
Well, it's some kind of artificial evolution. Yeah. Again, the aim here is not to simulate a natural evolution, because there are many things which don't make sense from a biological point of view. But yeah, I'm really interested in using this technique because, well, basically it works. So let's unpack a few of these ideas. The first one is that we have to choose a set of primitive cognitive functions. And these things are going to be things like match two objects or compare two objects, inhibit something. these primitive cognitive functions, basically you find them in the literature. And here there will be some kind of bias, because if you believe in some kind of theory, you are going to take functions which relate to that theory, but maybe another theory could have better functions. So that's obviously is done by the programmer. And again, there might be some bias, but later on I'll tell you some ways you can actually counteract this bias. Then you generate an initial population, and so far I've done only random theories at the beginning. It would be interesting to start with possible theories or parts of possible theories, basically to bias evolution into some direction. Then you need to find a task which you are going to use to evaluate the quality of your theories. And here for the task you are going to choose, you need fairly simple experiments. So you cannot take experiments that include too many variables or too complicated, because you will have to simulate that on the computer, and that's going to take a fair amount of time. By the way, all the parts about genetic programming, this is very, very quick. It doesn't take any time at all. What takes time is going to simulate each theory on a given task. And it's going to take time because you have to do that in a large number of theories, and also you have to do it several times for each generation. And just to give you some numbers, typically we use something like 200 individuals in the population, and maybe between 50 and 100 generations. Exactly what are the best numbers is probably something you could explore. Then for each of these theory, you compute basically the fitness, its fitness with the empirical data. And you can use a variety of functions. You can use R square or any kind of fitness function. So far we have used only R square. And of course, you can use any kind of variable you want. In psychology, this is going to be things like reaction times, percentage correct, number of errors, type of errors, whatever you can find in the data. So this is another view of the approach. So we have a set of empirical data, a set of operators, the basic primitives, a set of initial theories. We need this theory evaluation environment, which is where basically the models are going to simulate a given experiment. We can have a number of parameters, theories can have parameters, and also we need a fitness function, so we put everything together, this genetic programming, and hopefully at the end we get a wonderful cognitive theory. Are you more or less clear with this approach? Okay. Now I think that approach has some interesting characteristics. The first one is that only variable theories are involved. So if you have a theory that has survived a few generations, you know that it can account at least for some percent of the variance. And also you know that it can do the task. Maybe not very well, but it can do the task. Now in a field like psychology, this is actually quite important, because most theories in psychology are hopelessly vague. So basically you don't know what the theories say. And that's a weakness that doesn't affect the models generated by this method, because they are all computer programs. And again, if they have survived at least one generation, you know that the program is running. Okay. Now, something that could happen is that you have a program which is not that great, so it's going to be eliminated. But that program, in fact, is the precursor of a brilliant theory. Okay? So you could actually lose very good candidates, because at some point they don't fit the data very well. And well, there's nothing you can do about it. It's part of the game, and that's going to happen. Another thing which is very interesting, that was quite surprising at the beginning, is that at least with very simple tasks, and so far we have done only very simple tasks, you can actually evolve a large number of theories. And many of them, let's say 20 of them, are going to account for the data equally So when I started that, I thought, well, I would be very happy if I get only one theory a day or something like that. But in fact, when you don't get always good theories, sometimes you get nothing. But very often you get a variety of theories. Given the data we are using for the evolution, you cannot really decide between the different theories because the theories have used all the data that was basically available for evolution. However, these theories make predictions, and in fact, you can test them. And later on, I'll give you a simple example of that. And that is a kind of a reminder of what Poincaré said, that hypotheses are what we like the least. So in that respect, this method is very similar to humans doing research. It's going to produce many hypotheses. And again, a bit surprisingly, many of these hypotheses are going to be relatively good theories. Now let's look at a very simple example. So this is a task called the delayed match to sample task. One image is presented for a few seconds. This image is taken away, and then you get these two images, and you have to press the button whether the first image was this one or that one. And the variation of the task is to say which of the two images is not the first image. Okay? Now, the two tasks are very, very simple. They are actually interesting with the children. Young children actually struggle a little bit with that. They are interesting with animals who struggle a lot with that. And also, if you record brain activity like using fMRI or EEG, you can actually get interesting results. So even though the task is very, very simple, it's the kind of task that is used in psychology. And in that case, you have the data about the percentage correct and the standard deviations in a variety of conditions. So this is an example of theory that was generated. Well, here you get the tree, obviously, and that's the Lisp code. What is generated is with the Lisp code. And what this is telling you, well, first is prog n means do something in the sequence. So in sequence, do something. Put something into short-term memory. Then you start a new sequence. Put the second input into short-term memory. Put the third input into short-term memory. And then compare the first trace in short-term memory with the third trace in memory. Okay? Okay, this is not really surprising. It's kind of obvious solution in a sense. But don't forget this was generated automatically using just these primitives. And that actually accounts for the data pretty well. The next theory is more interesting. So what it tells you is to put something into short-term memory, put the first input into short-term memory, then put the third item into short-term memory and compare the first and the third item. So you totally ignore the second input. So that's not totally obvious. I mean, obvious from a logic point of view, it's clear that it's going to work. But whether it's what people are doing or not, well, we don't know. You could actually test the predictions of the theory by recording eye movements. So one prediction of the theory is that people never looked at the second input, so they look at the first input and the third input. Actually, one of my colleagues in France collected data about this experiment, but he never published the results. He collected data about children and some kind of in the baboons. And one of the two, unfortunately I cannot remember which one, was actually using this shortcut. So they looked only at the stimulus too. But again, if you collect more data about the topic, you could, well, in fact, refute the theory or support the theory. The point here is that you can make interesting predictions that can be tested. Now, what are the advantages of the methodology? Well, I think this is a great way to improve the likelihood of finding theories that actually account for the empirical data. And one big advantage of this approach is that you can, at least in part, correct for the kind of bias that the psychologists have. So when psychologists develop a theory, of course, they have a pet theory and they have pet mechanisms, and basically their search space is very narrow. Now, in a sense, that's very rational, because if you keep a narrow search space, you can search it in a proper way or efficient way. At the same time, maybe your search space is not the correct one, or maybe you miss some important possibilities. So I think that method actually allows you to search spaces in a kind of more open way, if you want. Well, I told you a few minutes ago that one limit in this respect is that the theorist is going to decide which primitives you are going to use. And maybe the selection of these primitives can in fact still bias your research. Well, this is true, but first, the way you are going to combine primitives is much richer than the way humans are going to combine primitives. Theories in psychology tend to be, in a sense, very static. So you start with a theory, and then people make some changes, but the changes tend to be very, very small. So it's not like in genetic programming where by crossover you create totally new theories. So just by this kind of mixing primitives, you can, in my view, generate theories which are much more varied than what happens in psychology. But also you can actually take direct measures to control this bias. So for example, when you select your mechanisms, you can force yourself to look at the literature in general. So not just the kind of papers that support your favorite theory, but you look at the theories of other people, and basically you put all these basic mechanisms. And again, that's going to look at spaces that you would not look at normally. Also, something that you can do is to take primitives from a kind of different domain. So let's say you're interested in memory. The natural way would be to take primitives from memory, like the example I gave you before, to talk about short-term memory, comparing, putting something into short-term memory and so on. But you can do things much more adventurous. So for example, you could take primitives from the field of decision making, and you would have things like compute utility, things like that. And then to explain data about memory, you use not the primitives from memory, but you use the primitives about problem solving, decision making. So basically you use primitives that probably nobody ever has used to explain this data. Whether this is going to work, I don't know. I'll tell you in a few years. That's something we are going to do. But definitely, that's a very powerful way, basically, to control the amount of bias that you have when you generate theories. Also, especially if you have theories that account for several types of data, then basically you create theories which first can account for many different types of data, which is not that common in psychology. But also this is going to force you, again, to avoid some kind of biases. So psychologists, and probably people in other sciences, when they publish theories, they publish basically the theory and the data that the theory can explain. And very rarely, though this happens sometimes, they spend time talking about the data that cannot be explained. Obviously, they try to sell their theory and they try to highlight the good fit. Now, with this approach, if you start with a database of results, basically this is what you have to explain. And if you can explain only part of the results, well, you have to tell that because no database has other kind of results as well. And as I said before, one big advantage of this approach is that you produce theories that meet the criterion of sufficiency. That is, the theories can in fact carry out the task. And because it can carry out the task, you know that there is enough information in the theory and also that the theory is logically consistent. If there is some kind of logical contradiction in the theory, basically the program cannot run. It's very, very simple. Now I'm sure you have been thinking about a variety of objections, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have found. I'm just going to mention a few of them here. The first one is that the size of the search space is very large. But this is true, that's of course the point of the entire approach. There is no claim that this approach can search the entire space or even a small part of the space. The claim is that this is more efficient than what people are doing. So, by the way, there's absolutely no claim that this approach is going to produce the best theory, or the theory, but this doesn't exist anyway. This is really about finding theories that are good enough. The next problem is probably more serious. It's a problem that's called the bloating in genetic programming. That's the idea that the trees can become very, very large. And some parts of the trees can actually become redundant. So for example, you could have a program that put an item into short-term memory, take it out, put an item in short-term memory, take it out, and keep doing that. So you don't need that at all. Well, bloating is really an issue with genetic programming. There are techniques to control for that. For example, the kind of evaluation function you use. You give a penalty for the size of the tree, basically. What you have tried is to use information about timing. So how much time people take to carry out the task. And that's actually a very powerful way to control for bloating. So the idea is that each primitive function has some kind of timing. So if you put something into short-term memory, it takes 15 seconds. If you take something out of short-term memory, it takes 15 seconds again. And because you have a time cost, if you keep repeating the same thing, the timing is going to be totally wrong. So basically, that's going to make your theory not viable, because the timing is too long. This being said, bloating is always going to be a problem, and part of the project I'm working with is basically to find ways to control this bloating. The next issue is also very important as well. There is a relatively high computational cost in measuring the goodness of each individual. That's really where all the time is spent, because each program has to simulate an experiment. Typically, experiments are going to have many trials, and then you get many individuals in the generation, and you get many generations. So that's going to take time. It's really a practical question that can be quite important. Something that might happen is that in your domain, you simply don't have the right primitives. So it could be the case that even though you look at the literature very carefully, and you looked at not only your pet theory, but at a variety of theories, basically humans haven't found the right primitives, and basically there is no solution, or only bad solutions. That might happen. That would be actually quite interesting if this happens in some domains. But I don't want that to happen in all domains. In some domains that could be quite interesting. But the problem would be the same with the humans, of course. If humans use the same primitives, they are not going to do better than the programs. Another issue which is quite serious at the moment in psychology is that some of the empirical data might not be reliable. So at the moment in psychology there is a replication crisis, which has two meanings. The first one is that very few studies are replicated. And the second meaning is that very often when studies are replicated, you don't find what you find only the first experiment. So if you don't have any interesting data, so if your data are just noise, basically that method is not going to work. The practical solution for that is to take data that have been replicated. And in the domains I'm going to use, most of the data have been replicated often so that you can actually be confident that they mean something. And another practical issue is that it's going to take time and efforts just to set up a database of entire data. It's not the case that if you go to the right place on the internet, you find a huge database with all the right data, maybe the right primitives. You find information, but you have to record. And that actually could be taken as a criticism of psychology. People should have been doing that for decades. Just find a formal language that allows you to describe the protocol of an experiment and describe the results in a standard way so that people can use them right away. But you don't have that. So, a few things about the current and future developments. So, I've got a large ERC project to continue this research. That's this genetically evolving models in science. And there are basically four main strands in this project. The first one is to build new tools for evolving models. And there are quite a few ideas. I'm going to mention only one. So the idea is that what you would like to do is to have a theory that can explain data from different experiments, if possibly from different domains. So at the moment you are here, the method works with a simple experiment, but one experiment that's the DMTS you can do. Okay? So the next step, which I think is not too hard, but you still have to do it, is to take several experiments using the same experimental paradigm. So you basically the experimental protocol is more or less the same, but you just vary one thing. For example, you could vary the presentation time. So in the example I gave you before, the DMTS, the presentation time could be 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, and so on and so forth. So in psychology, it's very easy to manipulate these kind of things, partly because it's the way the experiments are designed. And in most of the research in psychology, you have experiments where it's very, very easy to look at different parameters. And psychologists are very good at collecting data, running experiments, and very often you do have a lot of data that allows you to basically look at different experiments within the same paradigm. Then the next exciting thing, and that's getting very exciting now, is basically to take experiments from different experimental paradigms, but within the same domain. So for example, in memory, you have research called using a recall experiment, and research using a recognition experiment. So in the recall experiment, I dictate a list of numbers, like 1, 7, 8, and so on. And what you have to do is to repeat the numbers in the same order, 1, 7, 8, and so on. In the recognition experiment, again, I dictate a sequence of numbers, 1, 7, 8. But then what I give you is a list of numbers, like 1, 2, 8, 9. And for each number, you have to tell me whether this number was an old number, so part of the first list, or a new number. And for each of these recall and recognition experiments, there are hundreds and hundreds of experiments. There is a huge debate whether people use the same mechanisms in both cases and so on. So it would be very interesting to evolve the theories that basically could explain both recall experiments and recognition experiments, and if possible, really the same theory. Now the difficulty here is practical because the experimental protocol is going to be different. So you need to find a way, basically, so that your theory can understand what it has to do the certain task. And in principle, you should evolve that automatically, which is not obvious at all. And then the next challenge is basically to use experiments from different domains. Something I can mention before. So here, actually the emphasis is slightly different. You try to evolve a single theory which can explain data about memory, perception, decision making, categorization. So if I can do that, I can tell you that would be marvelous. I think number 2 is not that difficult. I mean, technically it's quite complicated, but I don't see any big conceptual problem. starting from 3, I think things are getting more complicated. These are mostly technical problems, but still important. So that's the kind of thing we are going to do in the first strand. So the second strand is really applying the technique to domains in psychology. And here there are 2 parts. The first one is to look at psychological data where there is no learning, like data about memory, perception. And the second part is to look at psychological data where there is some kind of learning. And learning is going to make things much more complicated because things change, well, everything is changing, which is not the case where we don't have learning. So my bet is that most of the data without learning, we are going to be able to do them, except when the experiment is for some reason very complicated. The kind of data I was talking about with the DMTS task, I think we can do that. With learning, I think things are going to be much more complicated. But we'll see. The third strand is to explain animal data. Now there is a lot of research about the psychology of animal cognition. So that's definitely something we can look at. And here there is a lot of research about learning. So for example, classical conditioning or categorization. That's going to be quite interesting because on the one hand there are many data and all possible kind of manipulations that have been done, replicated. On the other hand, most of the data are about learning, which is quite tricky. And the last part, the last strand, which is the most ambitious, is to explain data about neuroscience. In fact, this was the first idea I had when I developed the project. So I was very naive, I didn't realize how difficult it could be. So the idea here is to really try to kind of find a solution to the twin of cognitive neuroscience, which is to map cognitive processes to brain structure. So you have a variety of cognitive functions, the kind of things I was talking about before. You have brain structures, and then you want to make it. You want to say, well, in this part of the brain, I do inhibition, in that part of the brain, I compare to objects, and these kind of things. Okay, that's Macintosh. So that's supposed to be an image of the brain. Just to tell you that...
that's a very fitting.
Yeah, you're in the dark. So there's a lot of research trying basically to identify specific regions of the brain and to basically map them to some kind of function. So some regions of the brain are supposed to be about spatial working memory, others about verbal working memory, and so on and so forth. And maybe 20 years ago, people really believed that the brain, well, information in the brain was very localized. That there were really specific functions that were dealing with very specific processes. Nowadays, people believe more in broader networks. But still, even within these networks, there's the idea that you get some kind of specialization. So basically, what we want to do is to map these structures to function. And this is a very, very difficult problem. And some people have argued that absolutely no progress has been made in the last 20 years. One difficulty is that for certain parts of the brain, really we don't know enough about neuroanatomy. So even with the incredible recent progress about brain imaging, there are still huge things we don't know about parts of the brain. And the same, not only about anatomy, but physiology. Also, very often, and that's typically the case in cognitive neuroscience, the kind of theories that are used are simply too fuzzy and too vague. So, with this kind of theories, when the aim of finding such a mapping is simply hopeless. And of course, we have the problem that the number of possible mappings is just huge. We are back to the problem of research in a huge search space. And I think my main problem if you want research into neuroscience, cognitive neuroscience, is that the theories are too informal. And obviously with this technique, with the gems, you produce theories which are formal. They are computer programs, so at least you do better than people in the field. So what you need to use to create these mappings are the following things. You need to have information about the brain structures, and that can very, very quickly become incredibly complicated. I don't know if you've ever opened a book about the neuroanatomy of the brain, but there are thousands of regions and sub-regions and so on and so forth. And then what you need also to know are connections between the structures. That's even less known, even at the moment. Then you want to use cognitive functions, so that's the kind of approach I was talking about before. And you create the mappings between the things. And really what you want to do is something like this. So you have information about the brain structures, you have information about the cognitive functions, and you want to create the mappings. Okay. And in some cases, a specific part of the brain can do something very specific cognitively. In another part of the brain, maybe it's a relatively large part of the brain that is doing something specific. And you get other kinds of mappings of the And genetic programming uses this tree structure, which obviously are hierarchies, and both for the cognitive functions and the brain structures, hierarchies are actually quite useful, because obviously the brain is hierarchical, and you can use that property of genetic programming to help you search. So that's basically what I would like to produce. So basically, description of the structures and their links, a description of the functions, the cognitive theories, and how everything is mapped. At the moment, really, I've done only that part, a small part of that part, so nothing has been done about brain structure, but that's one strong in this ERC compromise. So I'm very optimistic, as you can see, and I believe that this methodology can be applied beyond psychology to most social sciences. Ideally, what you want is to use experimental data. I think there are ways also to use non-experimental data. I'm not going to look too much at this because there's already so much to do with experimental data. And also, I think that the method could be applied to hard sciences like chemistry and biology. Because, of course, in these sciences, there are many experiments. And basically, I think you can pretty much apply this logic in a direct way. You just change the basic primitives, and you change the experiments. Now, to finish, I'm going to make some links between what I think you are learning with GEMS and also with Popper's philosophy of science. Now, this is going to be very, very selective, partly because I have only a few minutes, partly because I don't know that much about Popper. But I think it's going to be interesting. Well, the first topic is the question of discovery and verification. And this is interesting because in philosophy, most of the research has really been done on verification. And there is not much interest in philosophy of science about discovery. And that was actually captured by Popper himself, who basically said that there is no such thing as logical method of having new ideas or logical reconstruction of this process. And basically, I find it surprising what he said. He thought that basically in the part of discovery, you needed some kind of irrational element, something like creative intuition. And in Bergson's sense, it's quite important because Bergson has a kind of very, what's the term? An expert in Bergson. Let's say idealistic philosophy. He really believed in, well, that's the guy who proposed the French is élan vital. That vital spirit. Yeah, vital spirit. So the creative intuition is related to this vital spirit. So I find it surprising that Popper went into the direction of Bergson. But anyway, obviously, James disagrees with Popper on that point. Now, I have to say, by far, this is not the first project that disagrees with Popper. In fact, more than 15 years ago, Newell's, Shaw and Simon actually showed that you could derive theorems in logic using a computer program, and they claim that their program, in fact, had some kind of creativity. And there are quite a few approaches that, in computational scientific discovery, that really show that Popper, I think, was incorrect. If you're interested in these approaches, I recommend this recent book by Alice Lane Sozu and myself, which is basically a selection of papers presented at the conference about scientific discovery of social sciences. In fact, the conference was held in this very room, and several chapters actually discuss a variety of approaches to computational scientific discovery. So the next theme is about death of theories. And Popper said, by criticizing our theories, we can let our theories die in our stead. This is, of course, immensely important. And I find this is a very neat idea. And this is really what James is doing. And I think this sentence was actually an inspiration when I started thinking about that. The next question is well, it's a very controversial question. What comes first, data or theories? And of course, Popper was criticized induction very heavily. And Popper said that, I believe that theory, at least some rudimentary theory or explanation, always comes first, that it always precedes observation. There is a huge disagreement about this, and I'm sure we can tell you much more about this than I know. In James, James really had a kind of interactive approach. So both theory and data arrive at the same point. So you cannot say that one is before the other. So if you have to decide between deductive and inductive, I would say James is more inductive than deductive. But in a sense, it's really about an interaction between theory and data. And Popper also wrote, the growth of our knowledge is the result of a process closely resembling what Darwin called natural selection. That is the natural selection of hypotheses. And of course, James agrees with that. It's the entire point of James. Okay, to conclude, well, first, artificial intelligence offers powerful search methods, including evolutionary computation. And these methods allow you to search combinatorial spaces in an efficient way. And of course, I'm using this method in James, and I claim that the methodology is very general. So it can be applied not only to psychology, but other sciences. Popper, for example, in 1972, has described scientific knowledge as evolutionary in nature. And basically what James does is to show that evolutionary mechanisms can also be used to actively evolve new scientific theories. Thank you.